Welcome to One Visit Away. Jacob, thanks for being here.
It's an honor to be here.
So yeah, this is the first ever live, well, not live, but it is the first video episode of One Visit Away. So a great honor for you. If you could tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So I own 86 Creative. It's a marketing and design agency. And the majority of our work is nonprofit work. So the essence of our work is helping our clients understand better what they do so that they can communicate it to the right people that they're trying to reach, whether it's donors or the end user of whatever their nonprofit mission is.
Okay. And tell everybody just a little bit about your career before that and how you wind up deciding to start it.
Yeah, you bet. So I spent 4 years with Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. And towards the end of that time, I was the creative director for their marketing department and quickly realized this is something that I wanted to do on a scale for multiple missions and not just one. And I was starting to do that on a freelance basis for a while, moved to Indiana, and in the meantime got a job as marketing director for an oil company in, of all places, Fort Wayne, Indiana. And quickly learned that was not the path that I was intended to keep. So that was when I got my first bigger client that I realized, okay, I can do this. Let's start it. And that was 8 years ago.
Yeah, nice. So this is a total curveball. Jacob is going to share some stories about his involvement, like raising money on some boards for nonprofits. But I'm going to ask you this. If you can, I have a theory, which some people disagree with, that sales and major gift fundraising are basically identical. So could you tell everybody a little bit about how you got that first client? And yeah, what was that process like? So we're doing One Visit Away, but I want to know about from the sales side as the owner of this new business, like how did that go?
Right. Yeah. So I agree with you in the sense that sales and major gift fundraising is all about relationships. So when people know you and trust you, they're very willing to hire you, and they're very willing to give to whatever cause you're trying to help them support.
Yeah.
So my first major client, it was all about relationship. I had been working with them already, doing some freelance work, and they had a bigger project that came up, and they trusted me and already knew me, so it was easy for them to say, "Let's do it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and so I think that's one of the things I've tried to get across in your sponsorship of One Visit Away is just how much, like you and I had been talking, you and I had known each other for more than a year before I ever decided to hire you. And so much of that process was just like when I was really starting to think about spending more time doing consulting, and I was talking to you about some website ideas and like the path I was going to go, and you were just giving me a lot of options and helping me out with like brainstorming different directions we could go. And then when the time came that I was ready to do the website, it was just a no-brainer to like, well, of course I'm going to hire Jacob, and that worked out really well. So we'll talk a little bit more about branding and marketing later, but you sit and have sat on several boards of nonprofits, and you've got at least one story you've shared with me about an event you started and how that wound up having a significant impact for a local nonprofit. Could you tell everybody about that?
Yeah, certainly. So this was an organization called A Mother's Hope. It's a home for homeless pregnant women in Fort Wayne. Very easy organization for me to say, yes, what do you need? How can I help? You know, and at the time, they did not exist. It was just a concept, an idea. So they invited me to one of their board meetings where they were discussing how they were going to raise the money to buy the house, to renovate the house, and then to staff the house 24/7 to welcome, 5 to 8 women and their, either born or unborn child. So that conversation was mainly focused on selling T-shirts and doing a spaghetti dinner. They needed to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. And at that point, those were the two ideas they had to run with.
Yeah.
And so I, kind of took a step back, and I'm kind of the personality that I'm an all-in type of personality. So if I say one thing, then I'm going to follow up with it, and we're going to do all of this, So obviously we need to do more than just a spaghetti dinner and sell T-shirts to do this
Lasagna.
and pull this off. Yes. And so at the time, I was just kind of like still fairly new to Fort Wayne, but getting to know the culture more. And, men in particular love cigars and bourbon and all this other stuff. And there were no men involved in the organization. And I saw that as a problem because the crux of this whole issue of why is there a homeless pregnant woman is because men are not involved. And if men were involved, there would not be a homeless pregnant woman in that situation. So the response to that can't be a singular feminine response. It has to be masculine and feminine response. So men need to be involved in this organization. And so I took it upon myself to say, okay, well, how can we get men involved? So we know men like bourbon and cigars. Let's have an event where we just invite men to come do this and listen to a speaker and have a bourbon tasting, cigars, and pitch to them what a Mother's Hope is, what the mission is, and what they can do to help.
Yeah.
It wasn't solely marketed as a fundraiser. Like, yes, you had to buy a ticket. Yes, there were envelopes around. It was mainly solely, in my opinion, about introducing men to the mission of Mother's Hope and starting a relationship with them so that when the time comes to invite them to do more, they're already primed to know the mission and be, in favor of it. And in that case, it turned out that it wasn't necessarily even a financial success. Like, I think we raised $10,000 total at the event. But in reality, the CFO of a major construction company was there, and the CEO of a commercial real estate company was there, and they ended up donating this big house. And then the construction company ended up renovating it for free. And then a cabinet maker was there, and he donated all these cabinets for the kitchen. And like a payroll guy was there, and he donated free payroll for the whole staff. So we ended up doing a massive, having a massive impact just by getting men together for cigars and bourbon and telling them about the mission and starting a relationship with them. And, in this particular instance, men enjoy a call to action to respond in what they know and what they're talented in doing. Mm. And so it was easy for them to say, oh, well, we can help with this, very easily.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I love that. I think one of the things I love about that story is it reminds me of there's just various points that nonprofits are in their fundraising efforts. And, a lot of times people knock events as like, events are stupid, and I mostly agree with that, except for in times like there's pretty unique circumstances. One of them is at the beginning of a nonprofit's journey, when you don't have a list of people who have been giving, $1,000 a year for several years, and you got a list of 100 people. It's like, boom, obviously that's who you're going to spend your time with. Focus on that. That's the key. But when you don't have anybody, how do you begin getting those leads? And I think events like that, I was just talking with someone a couple weeks ago who's looking to start a school, and I was telling him like, hey, like you know other parents that want to start this school or are interested in the same values, invite them together, just start having events in people's homes, small events where you can introduce people to this mission and start building your prospect list from there. And so I think like what you did there in first offering something of value that people would be interested in, cigars and bourbon, and using that as the vehicle to introducing them to the mission, which is the real thing that they care about, ultimately is what they realized, and then began giving significantly in unique ways, which have allowed that organization to thrive at that point.
Right.
So.
And it was a guilt-free event for men. Like, well, they just tell their wives they're going to support a Mother's Hope. This is a fundraiser for a women's organization. So, of course, they'll say yes.
Exactly.
But to your point, the other thing that we did at the same time was we did house-to-house events. So we would ask somebody to host an event, invite 12 of their friends, and, kind of like a Tupperware party, essentially. We coined them as baby showers.
Yeah.
So come learn about A Mother's Hope and meet the executive director. And I mean, we did dozens of those. And that alone, aside from the fundraising aspect, built a network of people willing to do everything that they needed, filling the garage with everything a mother might need after the birth of their child,
Yeah.
So that was, again, relationships.
Yeah, I love it. That's fantastic. So let's just jump into, let's talk about branding and marketing. And I'll leave it a little bit open at first, but yeah, I mean, what do you see as the significance of this for nonprofits? And yeah, let's just start there.
Yeah. So I've worked with dozens of nonprofits across the world and helping them essentially to elevate their perception, give them a stronger standing out in the public and helping them communicate, like I said, what they do in a more clear and concise way so that the audiences they're trying to reach can understand what they're doing. When it comes to having a strong brand, and by brand I mean an experience of who you are, not necessarily a logo or a visual identity, but having a strong experience with your donor or with your end user, giving them that high level of quality is a very trusting reality for them.
Yeah.
So I've had multiple nonprofits come back to me and say, we know we got XYZ grant, or we know we got XYZ donor to give a lot because we looked like we could handle it, essentially.
Yeah.
So our web presence was strong and our brand was strong and our print materials were good quality and they felt good in their hands. I've had somebody say, like, this just felt great. Just feeling it. I don't even need to open it. And it felt great, so I'm going to, support you. I know you know what you're doing because you invested in this piece.
Yeah. So now this is a key concept that I've thought this for a while, but I'm just kind of putting these two things together now. One of the things I've realized with a lot of my clients, one of the things I work with them on is helping them understand and really believe that their organization is worthy of a gift of X amount. A lot of times, we were just talking about this before we were recording, about an organization that, you were like, well, sometimes I wonder if they really think, like if the leadership thinks they're worth a $100,000 gift or $1 million gift. Because if you as the leader of an organization don't believe your nonprofit is worth $1 million investment, then no way is somebody else going to believe that it is.
Right.
You need to portray that first as the leader of the organization. And so I think that's so key, is just anything that can help people realize that and believe that about their own organization. I mean, I do it with my clients. One of the things I have my clients do is whatever's like that next level for them that they're not really comfortable asking for gifts in, they don't receive gifts of that amount. I just have them, like I tell them, just tell yourself this every day. Like when you get into the office, just tell yourself, we are the type of organization that receives $100,000 gifts. Like, whatever, awesome nonprofit is the type of organization that receives $1 million gifts. Like if you start saying that and start believing that about your organization, that is going to be transferred into the people you're speaking to and presenting them with opportunities. But if you're just always like, yeah, we're just kind of okay and anything people can rub together, if you think that about your organization, that's what everybody else is going to think about you. And that comes through as well through, one of the things I love about what you do in branding is it's not just the printed materials, it's not what everything looks like, but it's just what the message is overall. Because I think that's incredibly important.
Right. Yeah. And it's something that I've experienced a lot of nonprofits. The passion is very much there. They're sacrificing a lot to be doing what they're doing. And sometimes when we're passionate about things, it makes it more difficult for us to communicate what is that passion and how do I get somebody else passionate about that.
Yeah.
And we can have our head down in the mission, which is great, but we forget to put our head up and look at what we're doing and then communicate that to the people that we need to communicate it to. So a question for you. Am I allowed to ask questions?
No. But you just asked a question, so I guess yes.
What role do you think emotion plays in a major gift process?
It's everything. It is the primary factor. Yeah, people. I say this from experience, but also like the first thing that comes to mind is so Jerry Panis, who everybody who listens to this podcast has heard me talk about a million times. He's one of the greatest fundraisers that's ever lived, deceased now, but he wrote a book called Mega Gifts. The full title is Mega Gifts: Who Gives Them, Who Gets Them. And he's talking about 7-figure gifts and greater. And he interviews, like he's got a bunch of experience, and then he interviews all these fundraisers who have closed gifts of that size. He's interviewed all these people who give away gifts of that size. And one of the things that the people who give away gifts of that size is, they've told him, the first time I met this person, the first time they walked in my office, I knew I was going to give a gift of like a huge amount. I didn't know exactly how much, but I knew right away from meeting this person that I was going to do something significant. And that, I think that comes down to, one, how that leader of the organization portrays themselves, but then also it comes down to people can make those decisions so quickly because they believe so strongly in what that cause is. Like when someone walks in for, a Mother's Hope, representing that organization, pregnant homeless moms, the type of person who hears about that and can instantly make a decision without knowing much more of anything else, I am going to help in a significant way. The reason they're able to do that is because they have a very personal reason that they want to help. And so it always starts with emotion. People wind up determining exactly how much and justifying it through logic, but it always starts with that.
Right. Which is, back to your point, precisely the sales process.
Yep.
For anything, for consumers on consumer decisions, but also B2B decisions, those are emotional decisions. We back it up with our logic to like cover our bases, but they're emotional decisions that we make, which I bring that up because that's the foundation of brand and marketing, is when you understand what motivates people to do something, then you can communicate that more effectively to them to bring them further into what you're doing.
Yeah.
So a great example of this is maybe you've heard of McDonald's.
Is this a school?
So back in the 80s, McDonald's was trying to understand, at that point, most of their sales were coming through the drive-thru as opposed to people coming into the store and purchasing food at the counter. So they wanted to understand, well, why are people doing that? What's motivating them? And essentially, how can we get them to come more often, right?
Yeah.
So in particular, they wanted to understand, why were people coming in the middle of the day, like between lunch and dinner? Like, why was that such a popular time? And they found out, well, people were feeling, like they didn't have a big enough lunch, so they're a little hungry, but then they're also, the reason they're going through the drive-thru is, they're in a hurry, but they also are unsure about what do they want. Like, should they get an entire meal? Should they just get a burger and a drink? Should they just get fries and a drink? What should we do? So they brought in a group called the Right Brain People and Dr. Charles Kenny to study the McDonald's drive-thru superfan, so to speak, and trying to understand, well, what's motivating these people? And back to my point, what emotion is really drawing them to go through the drive-thru as opposed to coming into the store or going through the drive-thru at all? Do you have a guess on what motivates them?
Okay, so I feel like I've heard something related to this, like back in the day. My guess is it would have. I'm thinking about my own experience of frequenting McDonald's drive-thrus back in college, but I would imagine it has something to do with when people are going in to the store, they're like happy to be there and they're with friends or family. But if they're going through the drive-through, they're just kind of embarrassed by their decisions and in a rush, maybe. Don't want people to see what they're doing.
Right. Yeah, so you're right on. It's shame. They felt guilty.
Yeah.
They felt guilty, especially that crowd that came between noon and 5 o'clock. Like,
I've felt that shame many times at the stopping by for my 3 hot and spicy McChickens.
So it's a fascinating reality. Like, oh, okay, well, this makes a lot of sense. So from McDonald's perspective, well, how do we make that's a terrible thing for McDonald's?
Yeah.
You know? So how can we make them not feel that guilt and that shame?
Happy Meal.
That is one answer.
Okay.
But the bigger answer is the combo meal. Because if I can say a number and not the actual food, I remove a lot of emotion from that. I want a number one with a Diet Coke as opposed to I want a double cheeseburger and a large fry and
Yeah.
I don't have to say it out loud, and therefore I don't feel that guilt anymore. When they made the combo meal, sales went out the window, pun intended. So
I was like, I think you mean through the roof.
Then later on, that's why they change the numbers. So every now and then, because otherwise you get too connected to that number, and now that number means that food, and that shame comes back. But another thing that they had to do, this was more recent, is the 2-window pay system. It's not there for convenience. It doesn't make the line go faster. But if I remove the financial exchange from where I get the bag of food, I feel less guilt because they're different people I'm dealing with.
Dang.
Yeah. So,
crazy.
Yeah. So point being, that's how much emotion plays a role in just the, simple experience of going to get a drive-through meal through McDonald's. And that's how 100 million Americans will eat today is through the drive-through and through a combo meal. Not necessarily just at McDonald's, but
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. There's kind of 2 ways to look at this. I think the primary thing for major gift fundraiser success is what they believe about themselves, like what their personal mindset is. Because I've had this conversation with another friend in terms of what having my website did for me. So there's kind of various ways you can look at this. On the one hand, when I didn't have a website, I was successful, but I viewed that as part of the thing that was special about me. And this might not make sense immediately, but I'm going to talk through it and hope people will understand what I'm talking about. I was closing significant, large consulting deals as just Kevin Fitzpatrick. I'm a DBA. I don't have a website. I don't have business cards. I don't have anything. All I have is me. And people were signing large deals to have me just advise them on what to do. And people would ask me when they were talking to me about hiring me, do you have a website? I was like, no. Why would I have a website? It's just me. You get me. Any interaction is just me. And I don't know. I thought that there was something impressive about I'm having this level of success, and I don't even have a website. I've spent basically no money to do this. And now, why is this important? Because I then got a website, and now I had this other view of the situation, which was, man, I've got this awesome website. Now, not only do I have this just innate belief in what I know I can do for my clients, but I also have this impressive online presence. It looks like a real business now. And that generated a different type of confidence in me, which ultimately is much better. But the reason I'm bringing all this up is I think the way that the consultant, nonprofit executive, whoever it is, views themselves is the most important thing. Branding, website, and all of that is very helpful to allowing you to have that confidence in yourself. Like, it's something I think is just natural to me. So like any situation, I just view it as this is what makes me different.
Right.
A lot of people don't have that. And so having that physical representation of this is impressive,
right,
I think helps a lot of people with gaining that confidence to go out and sit down with people who could make a significant difference.
Right. So you are right on in the sense that it wasn't so much about your focus on the tactics, right? When you started out, like, oh, I need a website and I need business cards, I need all that. No, what you decided was I need a strategy. And right now my strategy is kind of the anti-consultant, right? Mm-hmm. And you did that for a while. And I think that's a great strategy. But it's great that you started with strategy first and didn't immediately jump to the tactics and say, I'm just going to do all this stuff so I can say I have it, right? So that when the time came that we built that for you and we built the brand and all the stuff, like there was already a foundation of strategy and a philosophy that you were going by that we were able to use to build those things and make them effective.
Yeah.
There's some great strategies in terms of like a web developing team that I've worked with. Their website is, we build websites, here's our email address. That's their website.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I want to work with them because they're different.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's their strategy. Like they build websites and their website is just work with us, here's our email. You know?
Yeah. I love that.
In addition to that, I think that the other thing that was important in building your website was even before you built your website, you're a great communicator. So you could get away with not having this for a while, so long as you don't want to scale your business.
Yeah.
And you want to like grow and network and do the more personal referral and personal networking thing, which is a great strategy because you're a great communicator. That's not the case for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in terms of like if I'm trying to start my own nonprofit or if I've been doing my nonprofit work for a while, I can forget or I've said the mission so often, I think everyone knows it. Like the tagline, just do it,
Yeah.
The marketing team at Nike was tired of that like a month before it even launched, like you have to get tired of that. Like it's going to be because no one is nearly as in tune with what your message is as you are. And you have to remember like, oh, we can't just retire this message because we're tired of it.
Yeah.
Like virtually no one knows it except for you. So keep saying it and just get used to being tired of it.
Yeah, for sure. So here's the thing that going back to when I didn't have a website, one of the things I viewed as positive about that, I would notice this about a bunch of other people who were in the nonprofit world, wanted to get started in consulting. They literally had zero revenue. Like no one has ever told them, I would consider paying you to do something for me. Like they've never even had that conversation. But they would talk to me because they see, I'm posting this stuff on LinkedIn. I've got this podcast. And they'd ask me about consulting. And I'd share with them some of the success I've had and, talked about some numbers. And then, they're asking me for my input on stuff. And I was like, the thing you need to do is go get a client. Like that's the number one thing. I don't care if they pay you $1 for a year's worth of work, but until you get someone to say, here is money to helping me achieve this result, then you don't have a business that is proven at all. And so I'm just like, just go get a client, start there. And then people go and build a website. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, you're doing this totally out of order. Like, and that's one of the things I think is why I viewed it that way. And kind of my point is, don't start with all this other stuff. See if your idea has merit first, which is, this is the place that almost every nonprofit is in. The idea has merit. There were people who were supporting it. But you can put like rocket fuel onto this thing if you can do what you're talking about, is get this clear branding and messaging. Because, that's another thing that I've been good at is just as a communicator, I can tell someone very quickly in the first 5 minutes what I can help them with and what it would look like. And so it's not nebulous, you know, it's not just like, hey, like I can help you fundraise better and you pay me some money and we're all happy. Like that's an oversimplification. But so many times, if we don't know very succinctly how to tell people about what value we provide, then we just wind up, you know, word vomiting for an hour, which is what so many nonprofits get stuck in.
Right.
And so having that clear branding from someone like you allows people to just get it handed to them. This is what you say. This is how you say it. And it will allow people to understand what you do, how you're different, and how you can help them achieve what they want to achieve through their philanthropy.
Right. And not just how, but also taps into their emotion.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is a mission for me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think that's so key because one of the things you and I was just having this conversation with one of my friends the other day about, I had all these ideas about my business and how I wanted it to come across. And you were just getting all these ideas from me. And, you know, we had these brainstorming sessions and we were talking about stuff. And then you unveiled the website to me. And I had never thought of these words at all. But, you know, I'd talk to you about how so many people think major gift fundraising is mysterious. That was a word I was hearing. It just seems like this very complicated, confusing thing. And my whole thing was just making it clear. This is what it is. It's not that complicated, although it's difficult to do well. And so you unveiled the website to me, and just the first thing right on the page, Major Gifts Made Simple. And it was just immediately, it was like, that's so simple and maybe seemingly too obvious, but I'd never considered it. And just those 3 words encapsulated everything that I wanted the confused, frustrated, disappointed fundraiser, when they wind up on my website, I want them to see Major Gifts Made Simple and immediately feel this is the place for me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. One of the temptations in building websites for anybody, but especially nonprofits, is we really want to be cute.
Yeah.
And we forget that no one knows what we mean by the cute phrase we want to put up there. And so we lose people, you know. People just don't go further down the website because it's just too hard. We consume, I think, like 600 to 800 calories a day consuming information. We don't like to do that. That's why we're headline culture. We don't like to read things. So if you can't tell me what you do in 3 seconds, I'm probably not going to stay around to find out.
Yeah.
Because I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Anything else on your mind? I know you had the McDonald's topic. I've got an interesting. I don't know where it's going to go, but the reverse sear is. I feel like there's something there.
So, I want to mention one more thing about your website. So another thing on your website is, you as a person and now you as a brand are just a very honest guy. So I was able to tap into that honesty and build a lot of your messaging on just like, this is the reality. This is what it is. And I think one of the best lines on your website that you came up with, I just transcribed, was on your About Me page. And the big headline is, I used to be scared to death of fundraising.
I used to be terrified to ask for money or something like that.
Something like that. That is relatable to anybody that wants to work with you, because why else are they coming to work with you?
Yeah.
You know, like that's a fear anybody has getting into the sales journey or getting into fundraising is, how do I sit down and ask somebody to help me? And how do I know what to ask them? You know? So my first 2 years out of college, I was a focused missionary. So I raised 100% of my salary, and I had to learn pretty quick, like how to do this. You know, how do I sit with somebody, explain to them the mission of Focus, and then ask them to support me personally in my mission work, you know? And there was a lot of failure in that, of like learning, like, I think to your point, I think a post last week on LinkedIn, like I knew what kind of cars they drove. I knew what kind of house they had, and they were shocked that I asked for such a big amount, you know? And I was like, well, I assumed you could, you know?
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, people that live very simple lives, looked like they didn't come from anything, and they became some of my biggest supporters financially.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. This is my second One Visit Away interview today. I did one earlier today, which will come out a week from today. And this guy, he wound up going to this, basically he went to this guy's house who just lived in like a super modest home. He'd been giving $2,000 a year to this organization for a decade. But just went to the guy's house and he started asking these questions about, he was concerned that his estate, he was concerned about estate like taxes. And this development officer was like, well, sir, like, I'm not sure if you know this or not, but the limit, like the point at which you'll have to worry about this is that like for you and your wife, it's over $20 million. And the guy's like, yeah, I know. That's why we're having this conversation. Yeah. And so it's just so funny how our perceptions, our initial perceptions of people can be way off, which is interesting. Like I'm thinking about this all to myself and I don't know how to put all these things together just yet. But it's like, yeah, that real estate agent that drives up in the $60,000 Mercedes, like, does not necessarily indicate that they are successful. Anybody can get a car loan. Mm-hmm. But your first impression of that person does stick with you, which is why, like, when I did go visit with this person who lived in this super fancy house in that LinkedIn post, and I asked him for $5,000, and he was like, I don't have that kind of money, and then later went on to give a $50 gift. It was like, I had this perception of him. The perception was not reality. And so maybe this is what we're trying to do with branding, is to have the perception match the reality.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that's precisely why I mostly work in nonprofits, is because my mission as a person and in my career is all I want to do is tell the truth. And early on, I worked with a lot of roofing companies who, spoiler alert, don't love telling the truth. So case in point, like we built this website for a roofing company and they're like, we want best roofing company in Georgia across the website. And I'm like, you're not really the best roofing company in Georgia. I mean, I've seen the pictures of your work. Like, it's fine. It's a roof, but that's a big statement,
Yeah.
But with nonprofits, it's the great nonprofits I get to work with. My job, all I have to do is unveil the truth of what they're doing, and they're doing awesome stuff. So it's just great. Let's tell the truth to the people that need to hear it. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And I think that sounds so simple, but it's more difficult than you might realize. Like the way you talk about things really, really matters to how people hear it. Mm-hmm. I was in a meeting last week with someone who was telling me about a strategy for their nonprofit. And this is a nonprofit I've known for a long time. And this person begins telling me about this strategy. And he begins with some things that like do not at all make sense to me. Like it sounds like he's saying the opposite of everything I've believed this organization was trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And then he winds up after a long explanation, 10 minutes of me just sitting there just thinking to myself, what in the world is he talking about? He gets to the end and then shares this one statistic about how they're achieving the result I thought was the goal in a much higher percentage now. And I was like, why didn't you start with that? Like say that at the beginning. We're now accomplishing this with much higher success. Now let me tell you about how we got there. And it's a little bit of it might make you think, this wouldn't make sense initially. Mm-hmm. If you present it in that way, I already know, like the outcome I thought was going to happen is what's still the goal here. And so I'm comfortable with what you're talking about, even if I don't understand it. But the whole time, my like, I just felt confused and like just sad, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's funny how if you're not presenting your mission in a way that resonates with people who have the capacity to make a significant difference, even if you're doing the most incredible thing in the world, if you can't explain it to somebody in a way that matters to them, you're going to struggle to raise money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's one thing that I've seen a lot, most common, is a tendency to overspeak.
Yes.
More than anything else. Almost out of a nervousness, you know. It's a fear of being too simple with what we're trying to communicate, so we just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and really don't get anywhere with it, you know. When you look at when they looked at the power of messaging in the 2016 presidential election, in the speeches, you know, there was one candidate who spoke at like a 9th or 10th grade level and another candidate who spoke at a 5th grade level. I'm not going to say which one was which. I'm sure you can imagine. But in terms of receptivity to a message, the 5th grade reading level was far more receptive because anybody could understand what that message was. Even if they disagreed with it, they still knew what the message was.
Right.
I have Mickey Mouse ears, so they just keep knocking off.
Yeah, I think that's so important. What is acronyms? Flush them down the toilet. Like nobody knows what your acronyms mean.
It's a remarkable temptation to say, well, we've got this acronym, and the second you decide to turn something into an acronym, you exclude somebody from your mission.
Right. Yeah.
You're saying you are not part of this club because you don't know what this means.
Yeah. So you don't know what it means. And so one, you just might miss it and not even it might not even register to you, or it might register to you, but you might not want to ask what it means because, well, if it's an acronym, obviously I should know what it means. And so, yeah, it's crazy to me how many acronyms people use. And it's like, I don't know what any of this stuff is. Even within the nonprofit industry, I would say I'm fairly knowledgeable about stuff. And I'll see things that people post on LinkedIn. It's like, I don't know what that means. Mm-hmm. Like, if I don't know what it means, how many other people that could be, potential clients or get on your email list or whatever, like, I'm not going to ask. Like, It's not. Right. And so just making everything so simple. And that's the great thing about that website you were talking about. We build websites. Put in your email address. It's start with that. Start with simplicity. And then people can ask you as many questions as they want from there about the things that they're interested in, rather than, let me tell you for 5 hours about everything we do at our university.
Right. Yeah. So just 2 weeks ago, I got a Word document that was 4.5 pages long that the client wanted to be a front and back designed document. I'm not kidding. 4.5 pages long, full of text. And they wanted it to be a front and back document. And in what world is someone going to be able to read all of that? Like 7-point font is what we're dealing with. Okay. Yeah. So, but there's a desire that, like, my gosh, we need to put all of this information out there. Well, actually, no, we don't. Let's find out what actually needs to be on this document if you want it to be front and back 1 page.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we turn it into a 4-page document. We still have to cut things out so we can add some level of simplicity and design and let the eyes flow through the document, because you want people to read it. Like, there's sometimes a desire we're going to put all this stuff out there and presume people are going to read it. Spoiler alert, they're not going to read it.
Yeah.
Okay? So just this past week, International Women's Day, Burger King decides to celebrate the day with a tongue-in-cheek magazine ad / social media post with a big headline, and then under that headline was some supportive text to give the headline context.
Yeah.
The headline was "Women Belong in the Kitchen." The goal of the ad was to say they want more women as chefs in their stores, because it's mostly male-dominated position in Burger King stores. And the supporting text went into that context.
Yeah.
But guess what? No one reads it.
Right.
So, of course, everyone's triggered. And, oh, my gosh, I can't believe Burger King did this. Even if they meant it as a joke, all this other stuff. Burger King apologizes. The PR team comes out. All these other things. Point being, no one is reading your 12-point font or lower.
Yeah.
No one. And if you can't say something in a headline that's going to draw them deeper into that content, you're just wasting your time writing it, editing it, re-editing it, trying to fit it into a front and page document and saying, great, we did this thing. Who knows if it mattered?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So can you think of so for me, when you're creating my website and branding, I had a lot of thoughts, a lot of ideas, could write pages on the matter, simplified it down to major gifts made simple, and then start asking bigger is like the action button. Which again, I initially wasn't like the start asking bigger part. I wasn't as immediately, this is definitely the thing. But the thing you were talking about, which I think is 100% true, is, well, put yourself in the position of the person who's winding up on your website. Like, what do they want to do? They don't want to schedule more visits. Like, they don't want to do that. I want to do that because I know what that means. But I'm not, if I put schedule more visits, start scheduling more visits, like no one cares about that. They want to do the thing that makes more money come into their bank account.
Right.
Which is start asking bigger. And ultimately, like, that is what, there are many things that are necessary to lead up to that point. But that's like when you've done everything well, you place yourself in a relationship with a person that you know well enough that you understand their capacity, you know what they care about, you understand what your mission, where it fits in with their giving priorities, and you can start asking bigger. All that has to happen. But it's wonderful from the person who's a potential client of mine seeing my website. Can you think of an example in the nonprofit world where you had, just kind of, there were nebulous thoughts, lots of ideas, and you were able to simplify it down into something similar to that?
Yes, every nonprofit I've worked with, right? So this is a great example. The Franciscan Sisters of Peoria, Illinois. Wonderful sisters, very humble. They run, one of the biggest healthcare systems in the Midwest, multiple hospitals. Obviously, they're Franciscan. They live very simple lives. They wanted a stronger web presence to attract young women who are going through discernment. Why become a Franciscan sister, in particular, one of these Franciscan sisters? So how do we invite that woman into this conversation? And really, it was just a lot of time spent with them, hearing them, like I did you, like, tell me why did you join the Franciscan Sisters, and what has that been like? What's the journey been like, and what attracted you? And then it's just kind of ciphering through all of the Franciscan Sisters. They have a lot of content, a lot of stuff, and just going through like, well, essentially that phrase, "My God and my all," is their their tagline already in Latin.
So let me interrupt you first because I've intentionally been not looking at the website too much because I looked at the website and then I tried to look away fairly quickly because I can tell it's done so well already. Like one of the things Don Miller talks about, you should be able to look at a website and within 10 seconds know who they are, what they do, and like how you can buy their thing, basically. And so I'm just going to give you some of my thoughts really quick rather than you tell me about it. Yeah. I just see two extremely joy-filled women who are wearing habits. Clearly they're nuns. Clearly they're in a religious community. It says, "My God and my all" in huge letters. And that is clearly the source of their joy. And so somebody that wants that too needs to click on learn more.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And, they have A lot of different, not a lot. They have a few different calls to action, so to speak, which is more than typical.
Yeah.
But they're just different avenues. So one is, I want to discern with these sisters specifically. That's like the hard call to ask. Like, okay, I'm clicking on this button and I mean it. The softer call here is in this bottom right corner is just join the book club.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy. It's a book you probably want to read anyway, and it's a chance for you to get to know the sisters on a deeper level. But you bring up a good point, too, about the picture, you know?
Yeah, the picture says everything.
Yeah, we can overthink that sometimes, and we can become a little too attached to things.
Yeah.
So I walk my clients through, the 8 rules of design as I've defined them. And the first rule might sound like it has nothing to do with design, but my first rule is your ego will kill your mission. Because when you become attached to something, a color, a font, whatever, then you forget that you're not trying to actually reach anybody but yourself. I want to be pleased by how my website looks.
Yeah.
And to your point that you said before, when we were talking about what your call to action should be, we need to think about the end user and not think about ourselves. You know, the marketing process and the brand strategy process is innately a selfless process. Like, this is not about me. You know, it's not about the Exodus guys love the color orange and that's why we did it. No, orange worked. That's why we did it.
Yeah.
The reason McDonald's is yellow and red is because psychologically those colors make us hungry and make us feel urgent. That's fast food, hunger and urgency.
Yeah.
So, when we think about back to this about the photos, like one of my good rule of thumbs, actually the 6th rule on my list is when you're done with what you're doing, when you think you're done with what you're doing, show it to a 5th grader. Ask them what it is.
Yeah.
Because they can catch things like, oh, if this was a random picture of a deer in the woods, it's Franciscan, right? Like, isn't he about animals?
Yeah.
Well, no, that's not what this is about. This is about a life of joy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is everybody right now, like everybody listening to this, go to your website and see if your website is as clear as this is immediately. And if it's not, then get in touch with Jacob, because I mean, this is transformative. And it's going through this process and just immediately being able to tell what it is. There's so many nonprofits that reach out to me that, like, maybe they just have a question about something, or maybe it's someone who's a client of mine who's referring me to another organization. I go look at their website and I can't figure out what they do. And it should not be that.
Right.
It should not be that difficult.
Right. And here's the good news for anyone listening and looking at their website now and thinking, oh my gosh, we've got this major problem. I bet you don't. I bet it's not nearly as expensive as you think it is.
Yeah.
It very well might be. We just need to change the words.
Yeah.
It might also be, wow, we have a terrible website and we need to invest.
Yeah.
That could be the case. But don't freak out and say, oh my gosh, we have to go raise all this money to build a new website. No. Just look at it and just see if it's the words that need to change.
Yeah. Yeah. And that thing about, not like the branding process inherently being selfless. One of the things I think that made me hesitant about the start asking bigger thing is because I was thinking about, well, who's going to like judge me because of this? And the people who would judge me because of that are other consultants or like, well-respected fundraisers and stuff, because they know, like, they'll say things like, well, Kevin, it's not that simple. It's not about like asking bigger. You need to like ask of the right people and you need to have the right qualified list. And like, yes, I know that. Like, I know that. But for the person who's in that like state of, I don't meet with people. When I do meet with people, it's really awkward. It's uncomfortable. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm not closing big gifts. Start asking bigger sounds good to that person.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of my hesitancy was about like, well, what are people that are never going to pay me anything or care what I have to say.
Right.
What do they think about it?
Which was our conversation we had at one point in the process, because you were giving me this feedback, and I was like, great, who's this coming from?
Yeah.
And I think I remember saying, like, well, I don't care, honestly.
Yeah.
They're never going to pay you.
Yeah.
So why do we care what they think about what the call to action is? But you bring up a good point about, recognizing whose feedback to care about, and criticism, and how do you respond to criticism when it comes to the work you're doing, the message you have, the brand you have, whatever it is. If you're going to make bold statements, you're going to get criticism.
Yeah.
And if you don't make bold statements, you're probably not going to do a lot of mission.
Yeah.
You're just going to kind of get along and go along, and you'll probably have done some good stuff, but that's it.
Yeah.
But I've recently had conversations with clients about this, about, well, people are criticizing this or this, and I'm like, well, great, but who's not criticizing you?
Right.
And what are they saying? And what's their response? And I think there's a rush when we get any criticism to like focus solely on that one thing.
Oh yeah.
And forget the fact that actually it's working for the right people.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy how this works. This goes back to, we all have so much insecurity about.
I don't. I have any.
Yeah, you're. I was feeling pretty insecure when those steaks were taking longer than you wanted last night. I felt quite guilty.
I was judging you.
I know you were, but let's talk about what I'm really talking about here is like when it comes to our work is not acceptable to someone else. For most of us, that is incredibly, like, it's just unbelievably painful.
Debilitating.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it'll stop you in your tracks.
Right.
It'll cause you to quit a job. It'll cause you to quit a career. And just because maybe one person says something bad. And so I bring this back to one of my clients recently. They were telling me about, there's this person that keeps emailing me, and they've got so much criticism of what we're doing, and they've got so many things to say, and like they're emailing me like every day, and I have to respond, and then and I was like, hold on, stop there. You just said you have to respond. Why do you say that? And they said, well, because we have to let them know that they're heard and like all this stuff. And I was like, no, you don't. Like, you don't have to do anything.
Right.
And ultimately, it is your responsibility to ignore that person, because they're literally like, they're not giving any money. All they want to do is be a bother and drag you down. And there are people who you are ignoring necessarily just by the fact that you are responding to this person multiple times every day. That means necessarily you are ignoring someone else who wants to help you and has the means to make a significant difference.
Right.
And so we'll avoid the person that can give us $100,000 because the person who doesn't give any money is telling us that we suck.
Right. Or to change their mission or to do something different.
Yeah.
Otherwise they'll pull their money or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Think of it on a grander scale. McDonald's, I'm loving it. There's a lot of people who don't love it. So we have to build a bit of a thick skin if we're going to put ourselves out into the world and do something, and recognize not everybody's going to like this.
Right.
Planned Parenthood is one of the most criticized organizations in the country. Sorry to say, they're doing pretty well financially.
Yeah.
So, there's something to learn from that. But on a personal level, you brought up, people, will change their career, their lifestyle because of criticism. Freshman year of college, I went to a small school in north of Atlanta. And in high school, I was top man on campus. I had big britches, I ran the school, And I get to college and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm completely intimidated by all these other great students.
Yeah.
They're doing this cool stuff, or, they've got a cool chair in their dorm room or whatever it is. Like, I'm just super intimidated by everybody else. The first night we get there, they have a big convocation where all the new students come in and the faculty is there and they welcome them. It's a very formal ceremony. And I was just like, I'm not going to this thing.
Yeah.
I shouldn't even be at this university. I don't deserve to be here. I'm a nobody. My roommate comes back afterwards and he's like, where were you? And I was like, I was here. He was like, well, like halfway through the presentation, they like talked about 5 incoming freshmen and like all this stuff that they've done. And they talked about this one student who had hundreds of hours of community service and won a big award from the governor of Indiana. And they said, Jacob, would you please stand? And you weren't there. And I was like, no kidding, but I had like completely told myself,
yes,
I don't deserve to be here. And so I wasn't there.
Yeah. That is crazy. That is, I don't even know what the word is, but that is the problem of every nonprofit that's not raising money.
Right.
They think that they're not special and that the one person who said that one thing that made them think we're not really making that big of a difference. And keep in mind, people aren't saying this consciously. It's the subconscious reason that you won't get off your email. It's the subconscious reason you won't stop doing your 3 times a week pointless meeting to talk with, Steve about what the Christmas party is going to look like, is because everybody has this thing inside of them that's telling you you're not good enough. That person doesn't want to hear from you. They are upset about you not spelling their name right on the invitation. That happens with everyone. It happens with me. I teach this stuff every day, and I just got an email. I got an email yesterday that this happened to me. I got this email. I read it. And it was something that could potentially be perceived as negative. And it just like crushed me. Mm-hmm. It literally, it didn't matter. Like, it didn't affect me in any meaningful way, even if it was negative. But I was like, this could be negative. It is the worst thing that's ever happened. That's the way your mind starts thinking about it. And it just occupies all your thoughts. You're caught up in it. And it makes you not want to go do that next thing, whether it's make a call to a new prospective client or whether it's making a call to the next person that you're supposed to reach out to as a major gift fundraiser. It's all these little things that are telling you you're not good enough that's keeping you from making that call. And so my whole thing is anything you can do to put yourself in a position that you're most likely to make those calls to schedule visits, do it. Like, whatever it takes. Like, because whatever you're going to invest in this, if it means you go to the gym every day, you got to get a gym membership. So you're just like, exercising, you feel good about yourself, you're eating healthy, all that stuff's important. If it means, like hiring someone to do your branding, or if it's hiring a consultant to help you get visits and like know what you're doing, or whatever it is, there's 1,000 things we could do. But let's say let's say all this stuff is going to cost you $50,000 in a year. Okay. Are you trying to raise $1 million or $10 million? Like, this is a worthwhile investment in these types of things that allow you to schedule a visit with somebody, present them with a concise, powerful message, and eventually ask them for a significant gift.
Right. Yeah. A very common conversation I have is, oh, well, this is going to cost money. Well, what is it going to cost by not fixing these things now?
Yeah.
What are you leaving on the table because we decided not to have a very clear message and we decided not to have a very professional website and print material catalog? What are we missing out on because we just decided it was too expensive?
Yeah. Yeah. There is one person that can make up for this 100 times over. I think it comes back to like when you have a worthy mission, when you know that your organization achieves what it claims it can achieve, when you know that's the case and people are giving money to it already, the reason we're not willing to do that next thing, to like bet on the organization, to bet on the mission, is because it's that voice that's telling you you're not good enough, you're not worth it, you can't do this. Like that happens to all of us in any basically any scenario where we're going to have to put ourselves out there, because to hire someone to work on your branding means I have to show this to someone. And if I'm going to show this to someone, I'm going there. Like, I'm going to be the one that's going to be showing it to them. And if they don't like it, they're going to tell me. And if I was the one that commissioned this effort, then I'm the reason it sucks. They think I suck. Right. They think I'm terrible. They think I'm a loser. Mm-hmm. This is how we all think. It's something I've learned more and more. And I have this conversation with basically all of my clients. Is it all comes back to mindset and how we view ourselves and our ability to push past those uncomfortable situations.
Right. Yeah. How we view ourselves, and also a confidence in how God views us.
Yeah.
You know, for people who have that understanding of faith, that's a huge component, because when you have a foundation of I know who I am and I know what my own personal dignity is, then all of these other things are merely just interactions with other people that I'm inviting them to do what I'm doing, and I'm okay with them saying no.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly it. And that's I had this conversation with one of my clients the other week. Basically, someone that was very involved with the organization for a long time had given enormous amounts of money. Basically, out of the blue said, I don't want to talk to you again. And it's crushing. Like, what do you do with that? Mm-hmm. And my response was exactly like very similar to what you said. I was like, look, I don't know what's going on in this situation, but I know that I've had relationships with people, raising money, very close relationships where all of a sudden the person just starts treating me like trash. Like they're just being seemingly intentionally rude, intentionally hurtful. And it's just like what in the world happened? And I sometimes wind up realizing years later, there's some tragedy happening in their life that like you don't know about at the time. Right. Something horrific, like, the types of things that ruin people's lives that it's very difficult to ever come out of on the other side. And so what I told my client was like, I have no idea why this person said that, but you are going, like, I know this is going to be the case, that you're going to keep thinking about this. It's always going to be on your mind, and you're going to be thinking, what did I do wrong? Like, I screwed it up. I messed up. I'm a failure. I'm a loser. That's how we think. And I was like, every time you think that, every time that comes into your head, that's just your reminder to pray for that person. Mm-hmm. Because there's nothing else that we can do productive out of that situation than that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's to my original point when we first started talking about this all being about relationships. Well, when that's true and you actually do that, then when those relationships end for whatever reason, that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
You know? Because we've invested our own emotions into this. We've invested a lot of our time just for the sake of that relationship alone. And I think you bring up a great point about you have no idea what's pushing them to do X, Y, and Z. But you can, pretty good assumption that if they have a pulse, some type of wound is driving that, And, Chick-fil-A, one of my favorite brands, as from a brand strategy perspective, they do this, right? Mm-hmm. So their mission statement has nothing to do with chicken, right? Their mission statement, paraphrasing, is to spread the gospel and to have a positive impact on people who come into our stores. Mm. That's why they exist. Now, if you go into a Chick-fil-A, do you think the person behind the counter, the person cleaning the toilets, the person handing out condiments, do you think they know that mission is why they're there?
Yeah.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
And they live it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I don't know if they still do this, but they show a training video. I think you've seen it.
Yeah.
And the training video shows
some loser branch strategist showed it to me one day.
And here he is. So they look at different people in a Chick-fil-A store, and then the camera pans on those people, and then it shows the caption of something about them, to the extent of, you don't know what all these people are going through in this store. Some people are having their anniversary for the first time without their spouse because they passed away. Some people are having like major issues with their personal life and their marriage. Some people are just having, issues with their parents or whatever it is. If you have a pulse, you have an issue, and when you look at people through that lens, you're more compassionate and more merciful to whatever they might say to you in return of whatever it is you're talking about, because you have a different context for what they're doing.
Yeah. That's not much else to add. It's just, I mean, that's the thing, is everything. It's one of the reasons that these things can be so painful, is because we do care about these people so deeply. And so you combine that, like, it's one thing if just a random person on the internet tells you, hey, your website sucks, whatever. Like, that is debilitating in itself. But when it's someone that you've been working with for a long time, that you care about, and starts doing this kind of stuff, it's really difficult. And so having that perspective of just, it's anytime someone's behaving in a way, this might be obvious to everyone, but this is a newer revelation to me, is just the idea of, like, young kids that are just seemingly always out to do something, like spiteful, or, there's just like, there's those kids in school that just, like, when you were there, they were, the bully, like, whatever, like, they're just always doing something that's like no one likes.
Yeah.
And when you're a kid, you're just like, this person's such a jerk. But then when you're older, an adult, and like you have kids and you start learning some more stuff, you're like, man, like, where did that kid learn that behavior? And it's like, it's probably how his dad treats him.
Right.
Like, and just having that perspective, it just changes everything when you realize, like, Laura, my wife, works in behavior therapy for children with autism. And like, one of the things she talks about is every behavior is learned. And it's just like, like, any kid that's acting like that, they weren't just like born that way. It's something that they learned. And anytime there's some adult who's like lashing out at you for some reason, it's something learned from environment or circumstances. And to be able to realize, like, hey, if they're treating me in this way, they must be going through something incredibly painful.
Right.
And so, it's
you don't know all the bad things you do until you become a parent of like a 4-year-old and they start doing things and you're like, I don't do that. You clearly didn't learn that from me. You did learn that from me. Got it.
Yeah. So, man, we're going down some crazy crazy tangents here, but it's interesting because one of my favorite books, The Go-Giver. I don't know if you've ever read that, but it's play off of The Go-Getter, which is all about, go, do stuff. The Go-Giver is all about put other people first, provide value, look how you can help others, and that will work out very well for your business in the long run. Like, it's a fictional novel, and one of the things that they talk about in that book is that any business principle, if it's true, applies to any relationship. So just like these ideas of treating others well, it's like, you should do that. You should place others before you. You should, like, do things to allow your spouse to have a break before you're like, yeah, I want a break. And these things work really well. And so where am I going with this? I was having this conversation with the other podcast episode I did this morning, and I have completely lost what I was talking about.
Great story.
It's a great story. Thank you, John Oberg, for the recommendation of that book. That's man, what in the world was I talking about? We were having this discussion. What were you talking about before I went off on this? I don't know. Well, let's just go into some. We're talking about. Oh, here's where I was going. We're going down all these tangents, but I feel like the reason we're getting into all this super personal stuff is because major gift fundraising and branding is just all about how humans interact with one another in relationship. And so, yeah, like it's only natural that conversations go in this direction. And that's why when you start going on visits with people, you wind up having conversations about so many things that have nothing to do with the organization. Like the presentation and the branding and the ask and all that stuff, that is 5% of the time. 95% of the time is just talking about what they care about. Right. Talking about what you did over the weekend, talking about travel plans, philosophy, theology, like whatever. And so yeah, it's just interesting that we wound up talking about bully children and Chick-fil-A.
But yeah, to your point, like, but marketing and a good brand strategy is all about understanding your audience, who they are, what motivates them, and that's a very human conversation to have. So I think anyone that is listening and needs a takeaway from this is to like go and think about, do we know who we're reaching? And ask yourself, are those actually the right people? Maybe they are, but be willing to ask yourself, are we reaching the right people? Do we know them well? Do we know why they care about our mission? Do we know what obstacles are in their way to supporting us even more? And how can we use a particular brand or marketing or giving strategy to help them overcome those obstacles? What tactics can we use to help them solve that problem?
Yeah, I love it. This is might be a decent ending point, but are there any, I always ask you, Ray, any final thoughts you'd like to share, Jacob? Could be about anything.
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 That's a dangerous invitation.
What do you think about the reverse sear? You were introduced last night.
I will never cook steak ever again other than that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. For those of you who don't know, this is just a tip, just a life tip. Most people, they cook a steak with the traditional sear, which looks, yeah, we're pulling it up right now. It's beautiful. Yeah, okay, look at that top right fillet right there. That is a perfect reverse sear. The reverse sear works so well because you cook the steak in an indirect heat for a long period of time, a low heat. A long period of time. Yes. It could be an hour, it could be 2 hours. But you're not going to rush this process because the reverse sear cooks slowly. You get a perfect cook, a perfect medium rare from edge to edge. Once it's perfectly at 128, 130, you take it off there, you sear it, comes out at a perfect 135, and you are... It melts in your mouth. Yeah, it's magnificent. So I think there's some relation to just success in fundraising in general here. There's a lot of prep that leads up. Sometimes it might seem like it's taken a while, as you experienced last night. But then all of a sudden it's there. You throw it on the heat, and you're eating delicious, perfectly cooked steak in 5 minutes, and which is a lot of times how it goes in major gifts or just slow and then it's fast. It is. Yeah, I mean, it really is. Like you go back to where we started with A Mother's Hope. Like you're having these events, in-home things, and you're building the base, and then over time, those people become more and more in line with the mission. They know what's going on. They see the results. And then you can ask somebody for a significant gift. And that's the beautiful thing about major gifts, working with individuals. Someone who has the capacity can just decide, here's $1 million. Like, they can just decide, here's $1 million. I'm writing you the check right now. And there it is. You didn't have to spend 6 years applying for the same grant, getting rejected every time, not knowing what they actually think. You can just talk to a human, and if they want to help, they can do so in as big of a way as they want to.
Right.
So integrate the reverse sear into your grilling strategies as well as your major gift fundraising, and you'll have a delicious result.
It's a great life lesson.
Yeah. But yeah, any final things? I guess we should tell people where can they get in touch with you if they want to know more about what you do.
Yeah, they can check out elevateyourmission.com. You can learn more about the nonprofits I've worked with, see some of the examples of work that we've done. It's always interesting. You know, my website is very visual, obviously.
Yeah.
But the visual components of the work we do are really secondary to actually what we do, which is we develop strategy, and from that strategy then comes the tactics and the visuals that you see on the website. But it's a process to get there. It's a reverse sear. It's a process to make sure we're saying the right thing and we're using the right color and we're doing the right, visual strategy to communicate, yes, this is what we actually want to communicate and we're doing it well, rather than, I like pink, so we're going to use pink, and I like this, so we're going to use that. No, it's all about the strategy and the process to get there. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, everybody, I cannot recommend you enough to go to elevateyourmission.com. I'm going to try not to over sales this situation. But yeah, I mean, like, it really has been, working with Jacob is one of the greatest decisions I've ever made for my business. In just yeah, I know sales and how to help people with fundraising. Creating a website is the type of thing that just sucks the life out of me. And again, like, just speaking with Jacob over the past year and just that brand strategy of what are we going to do? What are different options is incredibly valuable. It's not just here's a website done. It's how does this website fit into what everything else we're trying to accomplish over the next few years. Exactly. So great takeaway at the end of this interview is, don't jump to tactics.
Yeah.
It's easy to jump to tactics because they're tangible, they're visual. Start with, well, what do we want those tactics to do? And will those tactics actually get us to that point? Ask that first, then talk about tactics.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, Jacob, thanks so much for being on the show, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Great. This was painless.
Magnificent. Boom.